You know that sound? It's The Guy Doing Things, episode 33 returning. And today I spoke to Gili Hofman, resilience coach. Now, before the chat, I had no idea what it is, but it's gonna be cool. And since we had hot chocolates, I don't know how hot it is where you're listening from, but go and get one. Get ready for the chat. Thanks for tuning in. I hope you enjoy the next few minutes with us. This is The Guy Doing Things, episode 33. Here we go. So, Gili Hofman, we're sitting in Doppio Zero in South Downs. We're not being sponsored, but it's such a cool place to sit, such a relaxing vibe. I always come here, I know you come here often.
Yes.
But now we are here together. Welcome to The Guy Doing Things.
Thanks for inviting me, and I agree it's a lovely space to work in. And it's a beautiful rainy summer's day outside, so it's nice to be inside, warm and comfortable.
When you said summer, I was kind of like, what? Because we're both in long shirts and jackets and everything. I'm like, oh, it's summer.
I'm dressed
summer.
more today than what I was for long periods of the lockdown last year in winter.
Yeah.
So that, but it is technically still summer in Pretoria.
Yeah, it feels weird. But yeah, so we'll be getting our hot chocolates now, so the conversation will be warming up. But to do that, I always ask this basic question: where are you from and what did you study? It seems quite strange, but it kind of leads me into the podcast and also the type of person you are. How did you start loving what you do? So where are you from and what did you study?
So I'm from Pretoria, born and bred, but I actually grew up on a farm just outside of Pretoria. So primary school, I went to a very small farm school, which was great. Didn't wear shoes.
Nice.
And then high school, I went to a school in town, to School Alderwijn. So and that was a big high school. So it was great to have both experiences. And yeah, after school, I think one of the most formative things happened to me. I studied the wrong degree at the wrong university, and I went to the wrong residence. So
that happens to the best of us.
Yes. So I finished high school at a high, with lots of distinctions and leadership positions and stuff like that. And 4 months later, I had stopped studying, left university, and left my residence. So at that stage, I didn't thought about it as formative, but looking back, it was definitely formative. So I initially studied BCom accounting. I think today still lots of people go and study it, but at that time, which was luckily still in this century, 2003, it was very a good thing to go and study to become a chartered accountant, and I fit the bill, and all of the tests said I would do well, and I got great scholarships, and it was just not a match for me. So I took the rest of that year off. I was also burnt out. I only realized later, because I had a very busy high school career and was very active and had lots of responsibilities and performed at a high level. So the combination of the trauma of really not doing well, and then with the filter of being burnt out already, made the rest of that year just a year of figuring things out, healing a bit, and then I went back the next year to Tikkies, to University of Pretoria, and applied for psychology.
Okay.
So yeah,
It's quite a shift from the finance world.
exactly. Yeah. So a combination actually of psychology and education.
All right.
And I still had some BCom subjects because I thought I would become a teacher and then go further in educational psychology. So I ended up completing my degree and then did my honors, and then I realized I didn't want to do counseling or therapy. I love the psychology part. I love the idea of helping people, but I was much more interested in the psychology of groups and dynamics and how organizations work. So yeah, I studied psychology, and then after that I did my national service. I worked at a school for 2 years, which is no, all pun intended, a great learning school.
Yeah.
So to work at a school, and that was my journey up till 25. So had a great school career.
Yeah.
Had a tough first year. Changed degrees, changed university, started to study from home, which completely changed my dynamics and my interaction with student life.
Yeah.
And primarily, figured out through the humanities department and the education faculty what I wanted to do.
Okay.
Yeah.
Now I'm glad you said it's formative. I think in the moment and I say we because I started on the engineering track and also didn't work out for me.
Yeah.
But it later years you kind of figure out why it didn't work out, or even if it worked out it would be cool, but because it didn't, it kind of forced you to grow in certain areas, which is awesome.
So something I was quite thankful for was in that first year, an older lady who was a mentor for me, who worked at the Articofia at that stage. She was heading up all the youth leadership and development programs that they hosted for grade 11s, which I attended when I was at school. We maintained a relationship, and she told me I had to go for career guidance counseling at a impressive guy, Professor Cobus Maria, who's at Tikkies.
Yeah.
And that was the first very helpful experience to get some guidance from somebody like that, to talk about purpose, to talk about what I wanted to be, and to get an understanding of.
Okay.
Yeah, and then the next step was when I already made the switch to psychology, and I was still struggling because I didn't really fully recover from the burnout I suffered.
Yeah.
My mother sent me to our GP and said, talk to him and get a reference. I think it's time for you to go and see a psychiatrist.
Yeah.
And I went to a psychiatrist, and he referred me to a psychologist. So while I was studying psychology, I was seeing a psychologist, which is
it's a practical.
yeah. It was like getting my hours.
Yeah.
And it was a fantastic experience. So those two things helped me a lot to make sense pretty much just after something happened, which I'm happy for, because it allowed me to move on, where if I didn't have those two experiences of getting some proper career guidance counseling or getting some therapy to take care of a few things, I think it could have troubled me much later in my 20s.
Yeah. So all those experiences built up, and you took the journey, and now you are in resilience coaching. Now, I haven't actually heard about the concept until very recently. So tell me, what is it and how did you get involved in it?
So after I did the honors in psychology and I worked for 2 years at a school, I was very fortunate at the school I taught at. They performed at a very high level in terms of sport. And in my classes, I gave life orientation for matric pupils. and in the classes there were various boys and girls who had national colours in various sports, and their coaches on an informal basis asked me just to help them a little bit, just talk to them, because they had great coaches, they had great physical trainers, they had a physiotherapist, they took care of their diets, but nobody at that stage really helped them to prepare mentally for what they had to perform at.
Yeah.
And when I left my teaching gig, I was asked by the then Davis Cup captain of South Africa, John Lafayette. He also had a private tennis academy in Laurens Park in Pretoria East.
Yeah.
And he said, the players there range from age 12 to 13 up till 17 or 18. And most of them were like top 2, top 3 in the country, wanted to play professional, wanted to go to college in the States and get a scholarship. And he said, you know what, I believe, because he was a professional tennis player, he knew the mental side was important. And that was my initial introduction into sports psychology, and I did some further training at UCT in sports psychology. And for a good 5 years, that was the major thing I did. I only worked with athletes and teams, individual players, worked with lots of rugby teams, netball teams, hockey teams, which is important in Pretoria.
Yeah.
Athletes, swimmers, golfers, tennis players, of course. And after 3 or 4 years, I got the opportunity to work with the Davis Cup team, with the tennis team.
Awesome.
And we played in 2 World Group playoffs. I was there the last year or two while Kevin Anderson still played for South Africa. And I started an individual relationship with Raven Klaasen, who at that stage was number 200 in the world in doubles, and ended up playing in the final of the Aussie Open, final of Wimbledon, got as high as number 8 or 7 in the world in doubles. So for a good 5 years, that is what I did.
Yeah.
And out of that, I got a good understanding through the lens of sport how resilience works.
Yeah.
I think because of my own experience from the beginning, something that I think made me different than other people working in the same field as me was I wasn't only focused on performance, but I was also focused on health.
Yes.
Health in the sense that if you're not mentally healthy and there's not a good level of wellness involved, you will struggle to perform consistently at a high level. So, but at the end of my 20s, I started getting requests to work with people who started their own businesses, or people who had corporate teams, or people who are creative, who are artists, or in any creative field, who said, you know what, we think we would love to have the same opportunity to do those things that you only do for sport people at this stage. Would you be willing to work with us as well? Yeah. And that was a major step in a new direction for me, where I said, okay, much of my experience is in the sporting environment, but I have classical psychology training, and I've did many other development after that in terms of my own development in exposing myself to what's going on in the field of performance psychology, which is internationally a big thing. And so the past 5 years after I turned 30 was a lot of working in team environments in the corporate culture, how to have a look at the behavior of the organization and how can they enable their teams or their individuals to be more resilient and perform in the end. So resilience is always a good domino block towards performance and towards health. Okay. If somebody doesn't have resilience, they struggle to perform or they struggle to remain healthy. So that's why I'm now zoom in on the resilient part of coaching, but I do many other things as well still at this stage, but I'm intrigued. And the last year we had a lockdown and we're in the middle of the pandemic and we're still there, and suddenly the word resilience has become like a buzzword for many people, because many people coasted through life and suddenly they had to deal with something they weren't prepared for.
Yeah.
They didn't have the tools to cope with it. They had to work from home. They had to give up. There were no certainty. There was lots of disruption, and suddenly questions were asked of them they had never had to answer before.
Yeah.
So resilience has become a big thing in that sense as well.
Okay, no, that's super interesting. I love the way that you are kind of looking at this and taking this subject on. Now, obviously, you mentioned the L word, the lockdown, and that kind of pushed people in a direction that they didn't like to go in. But does resilience sometimes force us to go into a place where we actually have to seek discomfort to find growth? Is that something that resonates? Do you understand, or is that a way of thinking that you implement with your coaching, or that you think is important?
So with sports people, it's very direct, because they put themselves in unnatural environments where they need to perform week after week after week, and there are many things sports people can't do. They don't have balanced lives, but they are very good at this one specific thing most of the time. So for them, it's always, when I do work with them, it's a lot about how can I improve my level of intensity, how can I improve my endurance, how can I improve my level of bounce back ability. Sometimes I have to work on my consistency, sometimes I have issue of clarity, sometimes I have issues of commitment or confidence, and we figure those things out in the end for them to be more resilient under pressure when it's needed. In terms of the corporate environment or individual coaching, it's not always about forcing people to grow their resilience. It's more about creating habits, and when they're going through a bad time, or when they're struggling, or when something is disrupted, how to help them to get a good perspective of what's going on. Now, there are clients who like the idea of, I want to challenge myself, I want to go outside of my comfort zone, I want to try a new thing. And they understand the value of pushing themselves, and in the process becoming more resilient, and that resilience will help them in various ways in their lives or in their careers. And then I can of course help them with that. But the easiest way is when somebody's in a traditional sporting environment where it's a pertinent thing that they must be able to get right. Where I think it's a little bit more abstract for somebody in a corporate environment. But much of our lives are designed for us to be comfortable, to be predictable, to be stable, and to have a lot of certainty. So something like the lockdown disrupted all of that. So suddenly people had to figure things out that they never thought they should figure out, or will have to figure out. And that's why I think lots of the conversations the last 9 months, 10 months for me was quite interesting, having a look at applying some of the principles that I teach on the sporting side to everyday situations for people in their lives back at working from home or whatever.
Now, the reason I asked that, it's interesting that you say our lives are kind of designed to be comfortable, and that kind of cringes me in my backbone, because I think it's so I'm gonna say sad. It's really sad that our lives are created to be predictable, easy. Everything can be done from the comfort of our own couches, and that's the reason I have this podcast, and it's the reason that I challenge myself with these stuff, and getting more to a practical side, and that's the reason where resilience comes in. I think that where we need to get in a habit. I feel we need to get in a habit to kind of, like athletes, try to push ourselves into uncomfortable situations like the lockdown forced us to, but I feel we need to move into a place where we are kind of habitually pushing ourselves to a next limit, or not a next limit, but a different limit. And that's what I want to ask you now on a practical side, how do ordinary people, even in corporates, not being athletes, kind of, you mentioned habits, and I love that word because it's a powerful word. How do ordinary people get into the habit of, and this is not, I'm not saying everyone should go and bungee jump and everyone should go and buy a new bicycle or something, but just a weird challenge like taking a different route home, or eating a different kind of food that you've never ate before. So small little challenges that push us out of our comfort zone to help us grow. How do ordinary people kind of get into that type of habit and become resilient in it instead of becoming comfortable?
So I think an important thing to realize is that resilience is a skill that can be trained. You aren't born with a certain level of resilience, and that will be your level for the rest of your lives. I've had times in my life where I was more resilient, and times where I was less resilient than I thought I would be. And then it's always interesting to look back and try to understand why my level of resilience fluctuated. But as a skill, it's something that can be trained and you can improve.
That's good news.
So that's it's something that should comfort all of us. It's not something like a talent. Now, some people grew up in a certain way and were taught ways of thinking and were exposed to behavior that taught them how to be resilient. And some people were taught the opposite, where they were protected a lot and weren't encouraged to take risks and weren't allowed to make mistakes. And the combination of all of those things made them quite fearful. So everything they do today is to protect themselves and take care of that fear they still have. And that leaves them in a very small, comfortable zone, it prevents them from actually achieving more or being more happier or doing the things that they really want to do sometimes. So I think a practical example that I can take out of my own life is I realized that now I'm working with these people who are world champions or national champions or performing at a high level, but I also wanted to push myself a little bit more. So about 5 years ago I started doing what they call endurance hiking. So
that sounds awesome.
So it's I'm not a runner. I didn't want to go the route of ending up at the Comrades. But I wanted something where something that I would enjoy, but that would push me. And I like the idea of hiking. It places you in beautiful environments, makes you meet great people, but it's tough. So the longest one I did until now was 10 days. Hiking 260 kilometers in 10 days.
Nice.
So the longest day was more than 30 kilometers, and then there were shorter ones to balance it out on the average 25-26 k's a day. And it's tough in the sense that all of us can, if we push ourselves without training, we can hike 25 k's on one day. But the tough thing is the compounded effect of doing it the second day, the third day, the fourth day. And then where I did it was in the Tankwa Karoo. So we slept in tents alongside the road. You couldn't recover fully before you did the next day. So your level went down.
You most definitely sought discomfort in that situation.
Exactly. But it was also amazing in the sense that it was a very simple life, and it was only you and the road. And without seeking anything spiritual from it, in the end you end up getting something from it because you just put yourself in an environment that is challenging. So that is something that I would always advise people to. If you feel like you are becoming too comfortable and you feel like it's not who I am, and I don't want to end up 20 years from now feeling like I really never pushed myself a little bit further. It's to find a challenge that is frightening but doable. Frightening in the sense that it will stretch you, it will take lots of effort, there will be discomfort, but doable in the sense that you still feel like you want to go for it. If you choose something that's too tough, you will end up not doing it,
Yeah.
and then there's no value in it. But if you choose something too easy, like, okay, I'm going to walk from Vira Park to Alderaan today, then it's like, there's
Really?
nothing, it's not gonna stretch me in any way.
And for those of you who have no idea, it's not very far.
It's like
Let's just
3
say that.
kilometers, but it could also be like 200 meters if you choose your streets.
Yes.
Wow. So it's fine finding that, but you want something that is engaging in the sense. So I ended up doing more hikes after that. Fell in love with it, even though I struggled, but I got much more from it than the things that I struggled with.
Yeah.
And I'm now starting to prepare a little bit late for a 15-day hike in May, where I'm going to hike from Calvinia to Garis, which is in the Makwaland.
That sounds awesome.
There's nothing there, but I have to lose weight and become much more hiking fit. But it's and that's going to be more than 300 kilometers. So it will be my longest hike. Many South Africans go to walk the Camino or something overseas, and that's great. But there are actually fantastic hikes locally that serves the same purpose, and is I think it's much more doable in these times where we aren't allowed to travel.
Yeah.
So choose something that you will feel engaged with, that will stretch you, but that's doable.
Yeah.
And then there's always value in committing to something. So for me, it's in paying the deposit.
Yes.
Once the deposit is paid, it's like, okay, now this is real. Otherwise, I could easily chicken out.
Yeah.
And then determine what the first step is. The first step could be getting the right gear, or getting a training program, or just start to, in my case now where I know everything I need to know, actually, it's just starting to walk every day and build up my kilometers. But I think often people choose something and it seems too distant, too far, and they don't know what the first step is to get there. And if you don't have to know the whole route, but if you know the first step, then you're on your way, because then you will gain momentum, you'll gain confidence, and whatever comes your way, you can actually figure out. It's Google. You can you can ask people. There's lots of people who can help you along the way. And I think if the moment you get that experience where you feel like this was really tough, and it asked various questions from me, and I didn't like some of the answers I came up with, but I loved some of the things that I got from this. Then it's I don't think it's an addiction, but it's something you crave for, where you in a year's cycle, I'm looking forward to something. I know there will be a week or two where I'm going to put myself in that environment. And then you don't have to overthink it, because we know something happens when you put yourself in that environment. But I have parents who ask them, many kids are growing up very fortunate, that all the luxuries they have, they can ever want in their lives, and parents feel, to a certain degree, they feel bad for giving their kids that, and they ask me, Giri, how can we start with them? And then one of my favorite challenges is to tell them, you probably have some help in the house, but force your kid or challenge them to make their own beds for 30 days in a row. So not like one day during the holiday I made my own bed and everybody was like, that's amazing, we're going to bake a cake for you. It's like, can you do something very boring, very mundane for 30 days in a row? Because there's something in consistency that's beautiful. And when the kids get that right, without any fault, at the end all of them feel prouder, a little bit more confident, and whatever they get from that process, they apply that to their schoolwork or to relationships or whatever. So it's never wasted time to have a small challenge like that.
And that's the same that I thought, or that I found in real life for us, is these challenges and this seeking discomfort and growing resilience in one type of challenge is kind of, your brain gets used to, let's say, 80% of that process when you apply it to something else, and that's what makes it so important for me. And your step process is super easy. It's not complicated, and it's not filled with coaching jargon. It's simple. write it down, get something, and challenge yourself. And that's really, really super awesome. Thank you so much for sharing this. It's super usable. Anyone can use it.
Okay.
Where can we go to learn more, to find out more about what you do, and how we can get more into the resilience?
So I have a website which is gilliehofman.co.za. We're updating it in the next month. So, but there's a newsletter that they can register for, which
Right.
I'm going to send out a monthly newsletter. And then I'm on Instagram. My handle is my name and my surname again. So, but that's very personal. But there are lots of resilience things worked in between cappuccinos and sunsets. So I'm giving them the full package, the full experience.
Nice.
But yeah, just one thing about the habits that I didn't say. I think if people want to dive a little bit deeper into this, that if they can understand the value or the opportunity that something like neuroplasticity allows us, the ability for your brain to rewire itself and retrain yourself. If you can understand that and how a new habit can outgrow a bad old habit, and in the middle somewhere before the tipping point there will be lots of discomfort, and then suddenly it just goes and it flows.
Yeah.
If you can understand that, you will see resilience as a much more about being adaptable, being open, being flexible, and not only about being strong and tough.
Yeah.
It's the new face of resilience which I refer to. It's not about being the biggest and the strongest and the toughest. It's about being open and honest, even vulnerable, but having the ability to bounce back, and that's more powerful for me.
Yeah, and that's super cool. I think we can go on for hours. We can go on for hours with chatting about this, and but just giving us this snippet and making us excited about just getting out there. That's what it's all about. To just start with the first step, and if this chat can motivate someone out there to do that, that's perfect.
That'd be great.
And if they want to learn more, they do know now. And thank you so much for your time. I appreciate it.
Thanks
and
for the
good luck with
opportunity.
that walk. It sounds awesome. I'm looking forward to seeing the sunset photos on Instagram.
Okay, I will share some of them.
What a cool guy. What a cool chat. Go and check him out on social media, and we look forward to seeing you out there, whether it's one of those long walks, a bike ride out to the cradle, or whatever. But whatever you do, just keep going. And it was such a cool and fresh reminder to keep it going in this year. Thanks so much for listening. Until next time, goodbye.